name. I haven't even thought about it yet.
So we're ready to go here. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. Really quick, just a little bit background for the community. This will be kind of a three-part series here, of which we're going to be talking about student supports and achievement, kind of assess where we are maybe after the pandemic, some of the challenges, how we might be pivoting into this last semester, just a general update on some different things. So today we're talking about high school, supporting our students and learning, and we have lots of great guests. I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Lansfeld to introduce everyone.
Thank you, Chair Sherman and Board Directors. This is going to hopefully be a learning evening, and we are so excited to have our Stillwater Area High School team here, and I will turn the time over to Principal Rob Bach.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent Lansfeld, and thank you to members of the board for having us. Superintendent Lansfeld said she was excited to turn it over to us. We're excited to be here. We're going to talk with you a little bit about the pieces that we've been seeing here at the high school, the pieces that we're measuring, the efforts that we're taking and the steps that we're taking to try to meet the needs of our students, and give you a little peek, state of the state types of things. Again, I'm Principal Rob Bach, and I brought several members of my leadership team with me here this evening to help me with the presentation. And so before we get any further, I'm going to actually ask each of them to introduce themselves.
Hi, thank you for having us. I'm Bob Manning. I'm a Career Pathways Coordinator.
I'm Katie Papungatoa, a new assistant principal at the high school, former bar coordinator.
Hi, I'm Rachel Stile. I still teach a little bit of English, and I'm also one of our Pathways coordinators.
Hi, I'm Ingmarie Ryan, and I am one of our instructional coaches at the high school. Previously, I've worked as an English teacher and as well as within the AVID elective and AVID school-wide program.
And I've asked Bob and Katie and Rachel and Ing, among others, to join me here this evening because obviously they are key players and play really integral roles in the work that we are doing here at the high school to try to carry this out. And so as we go through the presentation tonight, we're each going to kind of take turns talking to you about certain things because there are certain areas of the presentation that really are germane to the areas that each of these building leaders works in. For starters, I'd like to talk with you a little bit. If whoever, sorry, I'm not in control of the clicker, but.
Right there.
Oh, I am? Oh, God, somebody was sneaky. I don't, you know what, sorry, I was on my own piece. There we go. I'm going to start just by introducing you to kind of the cycle of the year that we go through. You know, when we think about student achievement and the data that corresponds to that, there's a number of different ways that we can track that and a number of ways that we do look at that at the high school level. Certainly there's MCA data that we track. There is AP data that we track. There is ACT data that's very relevant to us at the high school level because students certainly have some skin in the game for that. So those are all important pieces of information that we track. The tricky part with using that is that it's tough to use a lot of those measures as a dipstick, like a point in time. And the reason for that is because they predominantly fall at one particular point in time in the year. That happens to be right about now. We actually just opened up our window for MCA testing. We got our MCA reading done this week. Next week, we're going to open up for MCA math. And then the week after that, we'll be doing MCA science. As soon as all of our MCA stuff gets wrapped up, we kind of transition off into May, and that's when our AP testing window starts opening up, and we have about 3 weeks of AP testing. You can imagine with the magnitude of those standardized tests, it takes a while to process all of those results and get those back to us, especially in a format that we can digest and make some sense out of. And so April to May, end of the school year, really is the primary point in time where we are going to try to get at the data that we're going to use later. We don't typically get that data until late in the summer, late in June. Sometimes is when I get our ACT report. August is probably when I'm getting MCA reports, and July is probably when I'm getting AP reports. But those are examples, again, of three of the big measures that we might use. So those are pieces that we don't necessarily have in the hopper now, but certainly we have historical data on. And so we use that typically, and especially with the timing of that, when we get that over the summer, We use that right away because then it's pretty fresh at the start of a school year. So that's when I'm calling together people like the people that are here tonight, along with others as part of our leadership team, to sit down and craft out our school improvement plan. What are the goals that we are going to have? And we use the data then that's hot off the press over the course of the summer to try to craft goals that are meaningful based on the results that we've just kind of taken in. Most of you are probably familiar, but our school improvement plan process mirrors or is in alignment with the district's World's Best Workforce. So the work of World's Best Workforce, each district has one, and there are 5 kind of goal areas that each World's Best Workforce team is tasked with. 3 of those goals are really germane to us at the high school. You know, reading before 3rd grade and being kindergarten ready and things like that are not necessarily things that we're gonna pay as close attention to, but certainly achievement gap pieces, college and career readiness, and lastly, graduation rates. Those are 3 things that are very specific to us. And so when we craft our school improvement plan in late August to early September, those are pieces where our goals are going to fall in those 3 areas. And that's what provides alignment again between our school improvement plan and what we're supposed to be doing as part of the World's Best Workforce. And again, those goals that we come up with are going to be SMART goals. They're specific, that are based on the data that we've received from a lot of these points. So again, when I shared out our school improvement plan with you probably a couple of months ago when we sat down and did the gallery walk, you may remember that all of our goals are centered around those kinds of data points. In particular, we look at ACT data knowing that there's a vast majority of our staff who are going to be impacted by that, as opposed to, again, if you settle on a 10th grade reading goal or something as a school-wide goal, we have probably 4 people that teach English 10 or 5 people that teach English 10. And so you've got a whole school-wide goal centering on the backs of 4 to 5 people. So we look at a number of things to try to make sure that our school improvement plan is comprehensive and involves all of our staff coming in. And that's the process that we roll out for them in the beginning of September. What we found this year in coming back to school after we had crafted those goals and said, all right, this is what we're going to do. And sorry, I should back up maybe just one last piece. In addition to being in alignment with the 3 areas of World's Best Workforce, another reason that makes an awful lot of sense for us is there are 3 kind of primary initiatives. When you look at the action plans and we talk about how are we actually going to go about accomplishing those goals, those action plans really fall on a couple of the areas of work that we've undertaken at the high school. Primarily, BAR, AVID, Pathways tend to be 3 of the vehicles that we use primarily to execute those pieces. That's also, again, why it's super important to have people like Bob, Rachel, Ing here, because they represent leaders in those particular areas and part of how we execute that with our staff and students. What we found with our students when we came back to school at the start of this year was, I think for a lot of us, the thought was, this is gonna be great, we're back to normal, and, let's get back to, just doing what we do, and away we go. And I think that's easy for people like us that have been in education for an awfully long time. We've been in educational circles for 25, maybe some of us 30 years. So a year and a half of dysregulation to a school year out of a 30 to 35 year educational experience might not be the biggest blip on the radar screen. We're used to that. We're ready to come back in. But for students that are in 9th grade, entering into 9th grade or entering into 10th grade, who only have 6 years, 7 years, 8 years of formalized education experience, you take a year and a half out of that of complete dysregulation. That's a huge chunk of their time. And while I think we all knew and understood that there were going to be some transitions coming back in, I don't know that we anticipated quite the magnitude of what we were going to see. And what we saw was a number of upticks with regard to student attendance issues, students not making it to class, not attending class on time, not attending class period. We saw a huge uptick in terms of just general low-hanging fruit behavior types of things that suddenly we were spending a lot of time tracking down and trying to regulate behavior or spend time on classroom management, which took time away from all of the higher order thinking skills that typically have been a part of our instruction. And at the end of the day, I'd sum it up in terms of engagement too. When we do get students to behave, and when we do get students to show up and sit in class and be where they're supposed to be, we had more teachers reporting just levels of engagement and getting students to produce something than we had ever seen before. I had more teachers talking to me about issues related to, you know what, Rob, I've changed my instruction for how we do this. I've cut back on the amount of homework because I recognize that might not get done outside of class. So I'm reintroducing that into my class, but I've given kids 20 minutes to write a paragraph and I'm not getting something from them. And all of those kinds of struggles were very, very real for us as we came back. And so I sum it up again with that last word of engagement. That's been a big topic of our conversation at school with our teachers and with our staff, is how do we capture that back? What do we do to get that back? And so we're going to talk with you a little bit about some of the things that we're doing, have done, and are currently doing to do that. And I'm going to turn that over to Ing.
Great, okay. So, as Rob said, one of the vital basics that we know is, and we've concentrated on so much this year, is the relationship of student achievement to our best instructional practices. AVID school-wide, not the elective, but the school-wide framework provides a really rigorous and a complete framework for us to be able to support our teachers that way. One of the things that we've spent a lot of time on is creating that student-centered, engaged instructional practice with our teachers and talking through with them how the rigor needs to be through the relationships that they're building. That directly relates to a lot of the work we've done through the BAR framework. And certainly the relevance happens through a lot of the pathways programming. So we took a lot of time looking at our SIP and the instructional growth goals and looking at building level strategies that relate to, again, very intentional best practices around a universal design that's culturally responsive to each and every learner in our building. So that work through instructional coaching looks really different for all of our staff members, but we've been able to implement that through a lot of the learning visit work we've done with our probationary staff, as well as a few discrete working groups throughout the building that are centered on some specific goals that they've had within their classroom. One of the things we know on the next slide is how important the student achievement connection is to the quality of instruction. So the ability that teachers have to directly impact achievement is something that we know from John Hattie's research is, again, directly results from the number of teachers who believe that they're going to be effective. So the collective efficacy of a teacher group is, again, the main part of what we're using our AVID school-wide framework for in order to build that and best practice of instructional leaders, instructional experts in our building. So we've spent, again, some additional time making sure that teachers are getting the resources and the spaces to reflect on their practice this year. Spending time on the student-centered kind of instruction has been the goal with wide variety. Again, just from what Rob was using as an anecdote there, engagement has been our struggle, and to be able to look at a student-centered instructional practice in a lot of detail this year has been a goal of many of our work groups, many of our PLCs, many of our individual coaching sessions. So from that, I'll pass this on to our bar and pathways colleagues to talk a little bit more about how we've looked at achievement through another kind of data, more specific data.
All right, so we started BAR in 2018. That was, and with BAR, it's very important that we track our failure data. So we look at week-to-week data, but we also take a look at this graph that you're seeing here is kind of our semester one. So this is looking at semester one in 2018 up to our current or our past semester one. And so you'll see like we had this steady decline in failure rates, which was great to see, and especially with our ninth grade, got it down to less than 2%, and then the following year, COVID hit, and all of a sudden, we saw our failure rates go up. And so this year, as we were looking at our failure rates, they were higher than we'd ever seen before, but we had heard, in working with BAR, you're talking with schools across the country. And so all the schools are struggling with this, and we're all trying to brainstorm on ideas on how to help kids. And being part of the BAR NSI, the Network for School Improvement, we do a lot with talking about PDSA cycles. Okay, what are we gonna plan, do, study, act? And so if you go to the next slide, what we noticed is you take a look at semester one, 2021 failure rates. And then looking at our average failure rates for our semester one this year, they were really high. They were the highest we ever had to deal with. And so it's, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna end with this? I mean, that's just not acceptable. We gotta figure out what we're gonna do. And so it took a lot of brainstorming with the leadership team to think about what kind of things could we do, knowing that we're going into the end of semester one. And so some of the things are outlined on that side column on the right. And what we had going for the entire semester was what we called office hours once a week between third and fourth hour. It was 45 minutes long. And it was effective, but we thought, you know, we're kind of to that point that we need to do a little bit more than just once a week. And so we increased the number of times that we had office hours in those last, when we came back after the holiday break, after the winter break, we came back, we said we needed to provide more time for students to be able to get that individualized attention with their teachers. So we provided office hours on a more frequent basis. We also extended the grading window. So normally grades end right at that semester time. We have that grading day. Well, Rob went ahead and gave us 2 additional weeks. So that way teachers could meet with kids after school to provide additional time to work one-on-one with them. And so that helped lower our failure rates. And then in addition to that, teachers were encouraged to consider if a student just needed more time because they had missed a lot of school, maybe due to COVID or other types of things that impacted their attendance, teachers could provide or give them an incomplete. And that would extend even beyond that 2-week time frame that we had for extended grade window. And so, and then of course we have that Schoology as a common platform for our students to use, and teachers had their materials on there so kids could access it, and that became very important when we had so many absences with some of our students struggling with COVID in their households and just figuring out ways to get back into the swing of things.
And one piece that I would highlight on this slide before we take it away is the idea that, you know, this represents failure data, again, one way to measure student achievement, right? And I mentioned earlier that we have a number of different ways that we do that, but a number of the things that we look at are very difficult to dipstick and take formatively throughout the course of the year. This is one piece. There are a number of people who, you know, may be tired of hearing the failure data, but this is one thing that we can measure consistently throughout the course of the year. This represents a tremendous amount of work. This falls on the shoulders of administration, people like Katie, people like our interventionists. That's why those positions are so important, is because people have to pull that data out. So we pull that out of Power School. We sit down either every week or every other week and go in there and extract and try to run reports that give us meaningful, real-time information about how our students are doing. That's what we pull together as a leadership team. We sit down and meet regularly to say, okay, like Katie said, what are we gonna do about this? So the numbers there in that middle column, 30.5%, 27%, 30.3%, those are averages when we run reports every couple of weeks, you know, so by the end of semester one, we've, you know, done this 6 different times or 7 different times of cycles of data that we're sitting there looking at. Those are the average numbers every time we're running a report. That's what it's telling us throughout the course of the semester. And that's why, as Katie said, those plan, do, study, act cycles are so important, because we're looking at that going, that's not okay with us. We've got to figure out something to do about that. And again, by the time the end of the semester rolls around, as a result of that, I mean, a big part of this, let's be honest, is sometimes students need a deadline, right? And sometimes students don't feel that sense of urgency until all of a sudden the final bell is about to ring, and then suddenly missing work comes in, or, you know, a test gets made up or something like that. And so I'm sure that a lot of that contributes to that. But the way that we have, or one way that we have, of measuring where students are is to pull those reports out, and that's what we do.
Can you, when you get this information, is it broken down only by grade level, or can you get a deeper dive into course or?
Great question. We can,
Okay.
and we do. Yep, and that becomes the basis of conversation too when we go into PLC meetings. So for example, if we see excessively high failure rates in, I don't want to name a class, but Algebra 6, okay? We can sit down with the Algebra 6 PLC team to say, if you looked at your data, this is what the data is telling us right now. What does this say to you? And what kinds of things can we do about this and plan together? Yep.
Great, thanks.
Yep. Another piece of data that we track that is a part of our school improvement plan, like I said, in conjunction with, or in alignment with schools' World's Best Workforce, is our graduation rates. Our graduation rates have been outstanding over the last however many years. It's something that I'm very proud of, because our general trend has been in an upwards direction, and I do believe that that's a direct result of our intentional efforts through BAR and our intentional efforts with teachers in tracking that kind of data when we sit down and have those conversations in PLCs, or we share that data out building wide. The other piece that I included on this slide too, the black bar graphs are bars that indicate our special education graduation rates. It might look alarming when you first see that, but what I want to point out on that is that the way the state tracks graduation rates for special ed is a little bit different than general ed. And we all know that students who qualify for additional services or need additional services and aren't quite ready to automatically be emancipated at the end of their senior year, if they qualify for transition services, they're eligible for that all the way up until age 21. And so part of the special education process as students go through 9-12, as they engage in IEP meetings, we talk together as a team, and the team decides whether that's an appropriate resource for those students. And students that do get referred to 18 to 21 transition services do not count as graduates for that year's graduation class. And so while the numbers there look stark because they're much lower, what I would tell you is that if you take last year, 2021 as an example, we had a little over 50 students in the senior class that were special education students. Of the 68, there were 68.6% of those students that graduated on time. Every other student that didn't qualified for transition services. So when you think about it, again, that's a good thing that these students are getting. We're never going to not recommend transition services for someone, but we know that that's going to kind of ding us or look poorly on our 4-year graduation rate for special education. The numbers there, if you look back at 2017, the first number there was down at 43%. That was prior to an ESSA calculation that was done where that forced us to re-examine our special education delivery. And one of the things that we recognized was we were potentially over-referring students to transition services. And so part of what we had to re-examine was, what does that transition process really look like 9 through 12? Let's make sure that we are really appropriately referring students to those services, and consequently, our numbers for graduation came into alignment. 67% is the target rate for ESSA, which is kind of like the latest rendition of No Child Left Behind or AYP kinds of things, and so 67% is the target rate for that. Our goal is always between 70% to 75%. We started out, when we first identified ourselves as very low, we said, let's get to 67%. We did that. Then we said, let's get to 70%. We were marching up in that direction, and then we started to go up a little bit above that. But last year, again, you can see 68.6%. But again, recognizing you've got a cohort size of between 50 to 60 students, one student is going to count 1 to 2%, just like that.
So I'm going to share a little bit about what's been going on with our Pathways program over the course of the last year in particular. So Bob and I have been building a framework to provide a lot of different options for our students. And we say, generally speaking, they fit into one of three different areas. One of our main focuses of our Pathways program is to look primarily at our academic programming. One of the ways we do that is about 3 years ago, we reconfigured our registration guide. So instead of listing our courses by department, we worked with a representative at Century College and we reconfigured them based on career themes. And the career themes align to real college programs and real careers. So kids can see we have 4 pathways, 15 different programs of study. So that was one big initiative we took at the beginning. What we've been working on over the last 2 years then is making sure that we've got sequences of courses for students. So they might take an introductory level course and then maybe a second level course, maybe even a third level course. We've also been working on course revisions to make sure that the courses are contemporary, they're aligned to real careers and field. And also we've been working on increasing our early credit opportunities. So college credits and our areas of articulated credits, concurrent enrollment credits. And so we've added 9 courses in the last 2 academic years for our kids. We've also been working on building what we call our accelerated pathways. We have one in business, computer science, and exercise science. Those are aligned to Century College, and in most cases, kids can complete 66% of their degree while at Stillwater Area High School for free. So these kids who go to Century only have to take the residency requirements if they take a certain combination of classes while on campus. So those are the primary areas that we've been working on related to our academic programming. We've also been focusing on college and career readiness, and you should have a document in your handouts tonight that's called SAHS Personalized Learning Plan. This document was made in collaboration with our counseling team, our bar and AVID coordinators, and with input from our staff. We looked at the 9 different benchmarks of the personalized learning plan, which is legislated by the state of Minnesota, and we tried to discover what are staff currently doing and where are the gaps that we can best meet the needs of our students, so when they graduate from Stillwater Area High School, they're successful and ready to launch. And so what you'll notice is for our freshmen and sophomore students, they have approximately 4 different coordinated touch points during their high school, during those years. And you can see some specific examples, like an introduction to our MCIS interest inventory. They'll have opportunities for pre-ACT or pre-SAT if they choose, introduction to the Pathways program, and even experiences like building their resume. As they get older, their junior and senior year, they're going to have about 6 opportunities to engage in their personalized learning plan. You'll see additional layers of Pathways programming, including Wednesday workshops, which we're excited to launch next year, career coaching, career seminars, our career conversations that happen twice a month, and we were really proud of our game day experience that was offered to all juniors and seniors earlier this fall. The last piece we talk about is our experiential learning, and you'll see another handout tonight. And if you look on the back side, you'll see that there are about 10 different types of programming to meet the needs of our diverse learners, all supported through our Pathways program. And this gives kids a variety of different opportunities to essentially test out different careers that align with their either MCIS or U-Science data, which helps them try out, maybe it's a job shadow or an informational interview or an internship or a mentorship, or we have several students right now in our directed study course. So it gives them real hands-on experiences, not only in school but outside of school. We've also built a lot of different community partnerships. So we have professionals coming into our school, whether it's at the classroom level through our Pathways projects. Maybe they're facilitating a lesson. We had a photographer come in last week to our photo class and did a demonstration there. We've also got kids going out and doing site visits at facilities, just walking around and seeing firsthand what those experiences are like. So those are just a snapshot of some of the things that we're currently offering through Pathways.
So,
Question.
go ahead, Pete.
Oh, the different learning pathways, the selection of those, how is that determined? Is that by demand, or are you just kind of guessing that where they might want to go?
That's a great question. So when we built our 4 pathways, we did it in alignment with the Minnesota labor data to determine what are the most common career clusters. And so those were how the 4 were built. Within that, we looked at where are sequences of courses. And so we have, for example, our fine arts and performing arts. We have some in our healthcare strand. We built a brand new education strand. Computer science, we looked at where are we seeing multiple courses within a strand, and where does that align with high demand, high wage jobs. We also build our schedule based on student registration. So we might have certain courses that form or not, depending on who registers for those, but we still offer all of the courses within those 15 programs of study.
We also used a design thinking model when we initially built this, where one of the starting points of that is to do empathy work. So we surveyed a ton of kids, and we asked them about their experience in high school and what kinds of experiences they would want from high school. And then, as Rachel said, we married that kind of with information from the Department of Labor to say, all right, based on what they're reporting to us and what's available out there, what makes sense for us to offer experiences in.
And I would offer one more piece, and the hope is that as we get better at this, the MCIS, which is an interest inventory, and the U Science, which takes interests and aptitudes, that the kids can use that data to inform the courses they take. If they're interested in taking courses that match with their career interests, or maybe even just their passions, they'll have some information to maybe make more intentional selections. But it's not something where kids essentially apply for a pathway or get locked into a pathway. The idea is to explore and discover throughout their journey into high school.
Okay, so one thing that we do is we serve all students, and we have 3 hypothetical students up here, Maya, Bruce, and Jill, high achievers, the middles, and the underperformers. Each type of student has talents, and we serve all of them. Another thing to note is that you don't join pathways, you don't sign up for a program, you don't pick a pathway. All of our students are in pathways right now. And it's a matter of, are they going to engage with it? So we're helping all of them become college and career ready. We're also changing the narrative of success. For too long, it's been, this is the path that you have to go to be successful, typically for your college. Our narrative of success is that if a student chooses a path that matches their interests and their abilities, whether that's a 4-year college, 2-year community college, vocational school, military, or going directly into the workforce, if that matches who they are and there's an outcome that matches labor market data, then that's successful. And kids should know that, and we should be telling them that. So we offer multiple levels of programming that Rachel was talking about. And so I'm not going to go through all of those. What I'll do is I'll give you a couple examples of kids that we're working with. So right here on the handout, this is Shania. She has a wonderful quote there, and one thing that she notes is that she was very stressed out. She's a Maya, a high achiever, and she's taking a directed study course next year as a dental assistant. So she's working with Grace Dental, one of our new partners. There are other students like Logan and Jake and Nick and Henry who worked on a project, a real-world project with a consulting company called SiteLogic, and they needed a cash booth. Some of you may have seen that. These students have not always been successful academically, but they're really good machinists and welders, and they learn the problem solving and how do you deliver something to a customer by working with engineers from SMC, a medical device manufacturer, and they came through. It was a huge success. We have students from our metals, woodworking, and art department collaborating on our Pathways office remodel, where we have kids who have designed the office and kids who have been doing the construction work with partners like Kate's Fine Homes. Who else? We have Smith and Trade Mercantile and Pro Concrete Countertops.
I know we have relationships with Century for the academic piece. Do you have relationships with Dunwoody or other technical college for that piece?
Yep. So, and I would say the relationships are learning more about the programs, having them interact with our students. So I have another student who we worked with, Dunwoody, to explore a architecture degree, design degree, and he actually was able to get a scholarship through a camp, just through our relationship with them, and he has a $20,000 scholarship now. So, and then lastly, Brooke, who came in, she's a real high achiever, but she was so stressed out. Elite score on the ACT, 4.0, varsity athlete, student council. You'd think that she felt really confident, and she wasn't. She didn't know what to do. So through a lot of coaching sessions, we offered career coaching, career conversations with people in the healthcare field, which she was exploring, going on tours at SMC, DSORN, and then there's a video that I think you've seen on this simulated operating room event. And so she met a radiology technician who has agreed to let her shadow him in an actual surgery. So she's really excited about that. And she's rethinking, she might even choose a 2-year degree in medical imaging because she knows that's what she would need to get there. And she can always get more education as she pivots through her career. She's not only more confident, but she actually said she's enjoying the journey, and she's, probably going to change later, and that's okay. So those are all success stories, and every one of those kids is becoming more engaged. And when they're engaged because they see the connection between what we're doing in school and potentially what their career could be, that will transfer into other classrooms. So
I just had a couple of questions about those partnerships that you have in the community. About how many partnerships do you have right now, and is that something that's growing all the time?
Well, to put a number on how many companies have connected with us is one thing, and we probably have 50. I just counted them the other day just because I figured someone might ask that sometime. But we're looking for good partners. And the good partners who will agree with me, because we've had this conversation, is we all realize it's not about, filling their talent pipeline and giving them employees. It's about being part of the community, helping kids. And if they do that with sincerity, they will fill their talent pipeline. So we have some really good partners right now. We have the right amount for how many kids are engaging with us, and we're getting others in the pipeline.
And are they giving you feedback on how to improve the instruction that you're giving students? Is that part of the partnership as well?
We have an advisory board where we work in those programs of study. So we have teachers with a group of industry professionals who can advise on what is needed in the workforce and what our curriculum looks like, and they're working together to build that.
Thank you.
My question was more related to, you're talking a lot about student engagement, which is something I think everyone at this table wants to see more of, and something that you're struggling with after COVID. How are you measuring student engagement? Do you have metrics that you mentioned how many students participate, that they're all a part of the pathways, but do you have different levels of engagement, and how are you measuring that?
It's a really good question, and it's a difficult one to answer. We have done surveys.
Okay.
So we've considered pre and post surveys. But this is our first year. This is really the year where we launched it. So if we can gather data as ninth graders entering the high school and ask the right questions, how do you feel about your future? What is your vision of success, and do you have a plan for your future? And then measure that at the end. That would be the real good data, I think.
There's a number of tangible pieces that we ask students to engage with through the personalized learning plan. I don't remember if Bob mentioned Use Science, but that's just one example of something where it's basically like an inventory that students sit down and take. Most of us are familiar with some kind of a tool, right, that assesses that. But the key with that is it's one of the most comprehensive ones that's out there, because it doesn't just assess what students like. A lot of times students don't even necessarily know what they like and how that translates out to here, but it also tells them what they have aptitudes in and immediately links that to things in the job market. So as the student goes through and does this, they're getting all of that information back. And so that's one example of an exercise that we've been able to incorporate through Pathways. And so whether it's that or participating in the game day experience, which again was an experience that Bob and Rachel had set up where students could kind of pick, it was almost like a choose your own adventure. Do you want to go to the University of St. Thomas for a college visit because you haven't conducted a college visit yet? Do you want to have the rep from Century come and talk to you about how to articulate your courses here? Do you want to, it was a buffet of things to choose from. And so we've tallied up the number of students that have been involved in that. And so there's close to 2,000 students that have engaged with some aspect of something related to Pathways that we didn't have on the table 2 years ago.
With the partners, the business partners and whatever, do you somehow vet these partners like you would for a school volunteer and train them, you know, give them some training on student management?
That's such a great question. We, it's on-the-job training. So as we work together, we talk about what works, what doesn't. I'm pretty honest about what will work in school with students. So a lot of people think, well, if I'll volunteer, I'll just come in and speak to your kids and tell them about all these great opportunities out there. That can work with some kids, it doesn't work with all. So we are creating a program. It's multiple points of contact in different ways. So for example, Anderson is one where we actually have a former teacher on their staff who I'm having, we're going to work together to have him train their staff if they're coming in. But one example of what we do, they'll come in and they'll present. They'll do a typical class presentation. Then they came in today and they did a demonstration. Kids competed in a window installer skills competition. They were evaluated, and then they're going to, some who are interested will go to a training center where they train installers, and those kids will potentially put in a window in our office they'll install the window with installers. So that scaffolding approach is kind of the model that we're doing where kids can engage in multiple different ways.
We have about 15 minutes, and I want to make sure they cover everything they have.
All right, so we've looked at that academic achievement and talked about that, our educators and engaging students and different ways that we engage students. But another piece of this is that social emotional piece. How are we checking in with our students and providing them a skill set that's going to help them moving forward? And with the BAR program, we have that in 9th and 10th grade. All of our students are part of the BAR program, and a component of the BAR program, the BAR program is social emotional learning with academic outcomes. And so what we do on a weekly basis in 9th and 10th grade is participate in activities called I-Times. And I-Times are very engaging, not curricular based. And so you might do it one week in the science classroom, the next week in English, then in social studies. But it gives kids an opportunity to build community in their classroom, to get to know their teacher on a different level, for that teacher to get to know them. Because then when you have that relationship, it's much more to see that engagement increase. One of the other things that we do with this is we do this BAR questionnaire, and typically we do it in the fall, and then we look at some of the things that we put in place, and then we do it again in the spring to see where our kids are at. This year we decided, because we had just so much trying to figure out where kids were at and what they were struggling with, we decided to do it 9-12. So we used our BAR questionnaire 9-12, and it asked kids, where do you need support? These are the top 3 areas that students shared with us that they felt they needed support. Number 1, improving my study skills, organization, just kind of getting back into that school mode. Managing stress, we see that quite a bit. Kids will share that they're really struggling with their ability to manage stress. And then that anxiety piece. You hear a lot of kids talk about anxiety and working with them. Our counselors do a lot to help support our kids with this, but our teachers as well, especially in the BAR teams. It's a common conversation that comes up in their weekly meetings is, how are we supporting these kids? What pieces of information have we learned in doing I-Times that helps us empathize with the student and their family and what they're going through? And so it's just been a really helpful way for us to stay connected to our kids on that social emotional level.
So the instructional techniques of AVID, the relationship pieces that Katie has talked about through BAR, the relevance pieces that Bob and Rachel have talked about through Pathways, in our minds, those are all examples of some of the student supports that we are offering our students. And if you remember the slide in the beginning, when I talked about the challenges that we were seeing during semester one, there were 3 things that I had labeled up there, identified. I said number 1 was attendance, number 2 was behavior, and number 3 was engagement. And during our last staff meeting, we talked and had some pretty intensive conversation around the idea that, you know, for anyone who might think that these pieces are extra things or things that, you know, we have to do in addition to teaching my content and things like that. I said, let's be very real. We all can identify the idea that attendance, behavior, engagement have been challenges for us. We're all looking for answers to how to overcome those challenges. This is the answer to that. This is not something that's in addition to it. This is the answer to our question. And if we want students to attend our classes regularly, if we want students to behave appropriately while they're here with us, if we want students to engage with us, then we need to offer them something that's more powerful and more compelling than what they want to watch on TikTok. That comes through relationships. That comes through relevance. That's how we are supporting students. The slide that you see here is a slide right outside our wellness center, because we know that there are a number of students who are processing mental health pieces, and that's an increasing challenge for a higher and higher number of our students today, especially coming out of the pandemic. I think it'd probably be increasing anyway, but certainly the pandemic has exacerbated that problem that we see. We do offer a wellness center that sounds great for students, but one of the things that you should know in getting the state of the state is that while we refer students there, our folks in the wellness center, that's an outside entity. That's Family Means is the outside resource that we partner with that comes into school, but our resources there are completely 100% tapped out. They are busy from the minute they get in with seeing students, and I could have 4 more of those people who probably would be busy there also. That particular service is a referral service only, so it's not a drop-in. Students can't just drop into the wellness center. They have to start through our counseling center. And if our counselors have assessed the idea that, you know what, the student's needs are probably beyond where we are as a school counselor, that's when they wind up getting a referral. But again, that's difficult at this point to get a referral. Consequently, what that means is that we have a number of students who wind up going to other places, including even the nurse's office, where our nurse's office is literally starting to see an uptick in the number of students who wind up going to see them because of some kind of mental health manifestation. Maybe that has manifested itself in them feeling physically sick, or they've got a headache, or they're tired because they were up too late last night because they're anxious or stressed out about all of the pieces that they have going on. And so over the last year or two, we have started a more intensive tracking system for the students that wind up checking in there. What kind of services have they needed? And we've starting to see more and more increases in the number of students that are needing some kind of respite for their mental health piece.
Quickly, Rob, you got 2 greens up there. Which one is the
That's a
mental health
great
green?
catch, and actually, thank you for pointing that out, because yes, one of the greens is mental health. The 31.1%, when I first saw that, I thought sure that was the mental health. That's actually not the mental health, so I don't mean to be misleading on that, so thank you for pointing that out. The other green slice is, however, I did a little digging on this, because I actually suspected that it was probably greater than that. And in talking with the nurse's office over the past 2 days, when we really dug into the data there, that green slice there is about, I want to say it was like 6.2%, something like that. And that one was the piece that is directly attributed to mental health. What we went through when we looked at every single entry for students that have gone in, so again, over 5,000 responses, which is logging almost, well, it's over 40 referrals a day, which when we were at the height of COVID in January and December was up more like 50 to 60 a day, because our numbers are down much more now. But one of the pieces is a more open-ended piece. So when the student walks in, there's a form that asks them, you know, what's the reason that you're here? And you can check this or check this or check this. And there's one that's more open-ended. We were surprised to see mental health as small as it was. So we looked through all of the open-ended responses. So students that didn't check a reason, but entered something in the constructed response piece. And out of the ones that were mental health related, that's another 10%. So 10% plus the 6% that's on there, about 16%, I think you could say, of the referrals right now are directly attributable to mental health. I would, again, hypothesize that that number is probably higher, because for many students, there still is a little bit of a stigma around mental health, and some of them don't want to self-report those kinds of things. So again, if I had to theorize, I would estimate that it's probably a little bit higher than that, but I think we can accurately say at least 16%.
And some
That's a
of
lot.
it manifests as a headache,
Right.
migraine, stomachache.
So one of the things that, based on the needs of our students, based on the BAR student survey, just based on what we're seeing, with the referrals to the wellness center, our kids need more from us. And it's hard to give more when you're already tapped out. And so one of the things that we've done differently this semester is we have office hours. The kids, there's an early release potentially on Wednesdays. You can leave at 12:05, or you can opt, so parents or families were provided the option of opting in or opting out. And so what we're finding is a lot of our students are staying. They're enjoying actually this massive lunch that we have. We thought we might have like 400 kids. We have like 1,000. So it's an opportunity for all the kids to be together. But then what we're seeing for our attendance is we're getting about 1,300 students attending. We had labeled it kind of as, if you are earning less than 70% in a course, please, stay, work with your teacher, but we're having students that are staying beyond those kids. It's a great opportunity for teachers to have that one-on-one kind of time to support students and help them academically, but it also is a great relationship building time for students to have with their teachers. Teachers can request students to stay. We have 2 sessions, so that way there's some movement. So every student that opted in was given a home base, so they check in with that teacher, and then teachers are able to also request them for our 2 sessions, so that way students can potentially see, 3 teachers in that time frame. But it gives them a home base too if they just need a place to work.
And just a comment that having a high school student, I just want to applaud for the pivot that you did here and how this worked, because he utilizes the time a lot more, and I can hear through his friends, but also just the way you communicated it to parents and rolled it out, the video that you did, Rob. I just thought that was kind of a really good gold standard to try to achieve for a lot of our different ways that we pivot. I just thought it was an excellent example. So I just wanted to say that I think it's made a big difference for a lot of kids, so.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This was kind of when we started out office hours, we were, okay, how are we gonna roll this out? And so our average failure rates in February were at where you can see them, and then in March it went up. And that's as we were trying to figure out what's the best way to get these kids in and get them meeting up with teachers. And so we at some point thought, okay, do we just send out a general message? Well, we found out that getting teachers engaged in the process is the best way to get kids to come in and stay for those office hours. We also put in place during the students' 5th hour an opportunity for them to self-reflect on where their grades are at. So on Tuesdays, they complete a form that says, hey, what's your grade in this class, where are you at? So it's taking time in the day to have them stop in what they're doing and look at their grades. And so we're starting to see this trend downwards in terms of our failure rates and more kids utilizing office hours.
And one of the last slides that we'll share with you again is, as we have tried to be as responsive as we can to students and student need, one of the best ways to do that is to talk with students and ask them. You give them an outlet to share their thoughts and their feelings and what do they need. And so we did organize a school-wide conference too. We called it Voices of Change. We actually tried something similar to this last year. It was a very different format last year because we were on distance learning, but we kind of replicated that with an in-person version this year. And we got more students to participate in that. And so even despite the large numbers of students, basically what we do is we harvest the main themes that wind up coming out of there that students recognize as areas of need. Not surprisingly, far and away, one of the top pieces is students are identifying for themselves. They need more awareness around mental health. They need to know what the supports are, what the resources are that we have available for them in school. They want to destigmatize the conversations around that because they recognize that as a very, very real thing. So that's a powerful takeaway. There's some other pieces there too where I think there's a desire for students to work closer with us as administration. So we've already even talked about some ways to invite students to the table to sit with us as we talk through some of those things so that they have a better understanding of how we do that. To Allison's point, we always are intentional with anything that we roll out or any way that we respond to any kind of an issue at school. But sometimes people don't always get that message, right? So how do you invite them in to make sure that they're hearing that message and getting that communication? Because I think if people have that communication, they have that sense of trust. And so I just thought that was one great example, again, of trying to be responsive to students and recognizing what they need. And with that, that's our 30-minute presentation. So yeah, if you have any other questions in the next couple of minutes, we'd be happy to answer them.
Just as you look at, I mean, I know there's still a large part of this year left. There's still the whole fourth quarter, but I'm sure you're already looking at like what is going to be the focus next year. Can you maybe highlight for the board a little bit about what next year's going to look like, what the summer might look like, or what's kind of going on?
That's the one question I was really hoping no one was going to ask tonight. My focus right about now, honestly, we just had senior meetings. Allison, you know this. You have a senior, right? We just had graduation meetings yesterday with our kids to start talking about getting through the end of this year. We will meet intensely over the summer. This group sat down with me probably as early as June last summer to start plotting things out and then took all of June and July and August to kind of put some plans in place. And we will continue to do that with the admin team over the summer. Part of it is we need to get some additional data. Like you said, the slide that Katie showed with the 3 bars on there related to office hours was really telling, because again, those numbers are going up, up, up. It doesn't look good when we're first rolling this thing out. But as you respond to some of that stuff, again, you gradually see that trend come back down as we get better and better ideas. So we need to continue to track that a little bit. We need some additional time. We need to get to the end of this year, honestly, and see what does our grade data look like at the end of semester 2. That will tell us in turn how we probably need to pivot and respond next year.
Any other questions?
I just have a comment. This has been super informative. Like, it's really interesting to see how these programs are actually rolling out. We hear about them at the board table, and just to kind of hear the nuance and the intentionality that you guys are all putting into this is really impressive, especially with the Pathways program. I didn't fully understand what that was. Having little kids and not near high school yet, I haven't gotten to experience it yet, but I love the idea that kids are really, from the moment they start high school, starting to figure out what they're going to do with the rest of their lives, so that they have that motivation to focus in school and get through not just regular math, but how I'm going to use this in the future. So I feel like that's great work, really great work. So very impressive. And the BAR program, I love hearing about the BAR program and how that really is intentionally supporting our kids with social emotional work. And honestly, I was a little worried because I figured our academics this year would be a little bumpy. But to hear you guys really working hard to recognize and monitor those bumps along the way, not shying away from them and actually addressing them head on is really, really good. So I appreciate all the work that you guys are doing. I'm sure I'm going to have more questions later, but I'm still processing.
Do you have time for a quick?
Yep,
Okay,
go ahead.
Director Riley.
This is probably more for Bob with the technical piece of it. Do our kids have the opportunity to walk out with a certificate when they graduate?
Like an industry certificate, yes. We're working on that. There are certificates that we could offer, but again, this is the first year, but I've had conversations with employers about what do they value. Because what we don't want to do is have a kid work towards a certificate and have the false impression that that's going to do something for them. U-Science merged with a company called Precision Exams, which has certificates that we can actually label as being given the stamp of approval. So say Anderson says this particular certificate is what we do value, that would be called the Anderson certificate if a student achieves it, and they can walk in and present it to them. But we're working on that.
Like CNC or anything like that? Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Okay. I just want to say thank you. This is an amazing group of educators that are completely dedicated and passionate about what they do. They care about each child, and it's just amazing work. Thank you. It's been very innovative. We are so happy that this pandemic is maybe slowing down, knock on wood, and we have been keeping our head above water with the pandemic, and now the work is starting back up again. And as you can see, there's some amazing things going on to support our kids academically, socially, and emotionally. And in the following weeks, we're excited to have middle school and elementary school representatives here to share what they've been doing. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take just maybe a couple-minute recess here before we start the business meeting. Thank you.
I know I should have brought a layer just.